Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis. Welcome to episode 41. Now this week I'm kind of suffering a little bit from the man flu, but we've still got a tutorial for you. We've actually got a segment of one of my full downloadable tutorials that I've got on my web store called Athlete. And in this video I want to show you how you can use what's called a reflective gradient to add in a light source in the distance, and also how you can use a blend mode to make a very, very quick cutout. Alright, before we add the sky in, let's just tidy things up here. So over in the layers panel where our track is, it's called layer 1. I'm going to double click on the name there, and then I can type in the name of track, just so everything's nice and labelled and we know what layer does what. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is go to the File menu and choose Place. Yours may say Place Embedded, it may also just say Place. That all depends on whatever version of Photoshop you're using. I'm on CC and the latest update gives me the option of Place Embedded. Either way, they're both going to be fine. So click on the Place. We then navigate to the folder that contains our sky, and this will be the folder that you downloaded with this tutorial. Click on the sky and then click Place. Now what that's going to do is it's actually bring the sky into the document that you're working on. If you just use the File and Open command, it would have opened it up as a completely separate document. Not a problem, but that would then mean that you'd need to drag it over into the running track picture. So it's just like another step. By using the Place command, it kind of means that that's one step you don't have to do. So it's a very quick way to work. When it comes in, it already has these transform handles around. So I'm just going to hold down my Shift and Alt key, click on any of the points in the upper or lower parts of the image and drag it out just so I make sure it does fill the actual screen. And then press Enter or Return, or press the tick at the top of the screen. Also, when you use the Place command, you'll notice from the Layers panel, the image actually comes in as a smart object. Now, looking at the Layers panel, our sky is on top of everything. We can't see the running track at the moment. So to make sure we can see that, I'm going to go to my Move tool over in the toolbar. I can get that by pressing V on the keyboard. And then I'm just going to go to the Layers panel and I'm going to click on the thumbnail containing the sky and then drag it down so it's underneath the running track. When it's just below it, I then let go and it appears like so. Now, the next thing I need to do is to kind of like make things marry up and make sense. Now, you'll remember at the start of this tutorial, I just mentioned about the lighting and the fact that our model had highlights going down either side of his body. Now, that's because we're going to have a bright light source way in the distance coming over the horizon. So we're now going to add that in. And this is really simple, just using a gradient. Before we do that, we need to go to the, click on the uppermost layer in the layer stack, and then we're going to add a blank layer, because this is where we're going to add our light onto. In fact, while we're there, it's called layer 1 at the moment. Let's just double click on the name there and rename it to light, just again so we know what we're doing. Okay, so we need to make sure our foreground and background color over in the toolbar on the left hand side are set to their default. If yours aren't, first of all just press D and it'll make sure that they're black and white. And because we're adding a light source in now, I want it to be a white light source. I need my foreground color to be white. At the moment, when you look at my toolbar, that foreground color is black. So I'm going to just use this little two-headed arrow just above it. When I press on that, it swaps them over. And another quick way of doing that is just by pressing the X key on your keyboard. And you'll see when I press it now continually, you see how these colors swap between each other. But I want a white foreground color. I now need to go to the toolbar and get a gradient. And that's about halfway down on the toolbar here. We can click. Just here we can see we've got a gradient tool. Another way of going to it is just by pressing G on the keyboard. And when you use any tool, or virtually any tool in Photoshop, when you have it selected, at the top of the screen you have a number of options to define how that tool works. So at the far left here we've got a gradient, and I can click on that gradient to bring up the gradient editor. And this is where I can choose any of a number of gradients that are already built into Photoshop. But the only one I want is the second one along, and that's called foreground to transparent. And we can just see it, the second one along just here. I'm going to click on that and then just click OK. Now, another thing we need to do at the top of the toolbar, sorry, at the top of the screen here where we have our options, we have 4 or 5 buttons here, and there's 5 actually, that determine what kind of gradient we want. Now, we want the fourth one along from the left. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. This one here, which is called reflective gradient. We'll click on that. Then I'm going to come into my image and I'm going to put my cursor just to the point where the running track meets the sky. So I'll put my cursor down, hold it down. I'm now going to hold down my shift key just so when I drag upwards, I get a nice straight line. And I'm going to take it roughly halfway up into the sky, something like that. And then I'll let go. So you'll see it lays down this nice bright light source, but it doesn't just lay it down in the direction that I dragged into the sky. It's kind of repeated it at the bottom. It's reflected it, hence why it's called a reflective gradient. So there's our nice bright light source. It's on its own layer, so if you think that's maybe too bright, you can lower the opacity or the strength, but just bear in mind that you don't want to see too much of that very, very defined line in the distance where the running track meets the sky. Now, the last thing I'll do before we start working on our athlete is something that I do on a lot of my pictures, and that's kind of adds in a bit more interest by adding in some birds in the distance. It's kind of like a little signature thing I do. So I want to show you how I do that. Now, if you go to the File menu and choose this Place command and navigate to the folder that you would have got with the download on this tutorial here, you'll have a file there called Birds. And when we click on that and then choose Place, obviously like before, it puts that document into the one we're working on. We get the free transform handles here. So I want to scale these down now so they're going to be birds that are like way in the distance. So I'm going to hold down my Shift and Alt key, click on any of the handles in the upper or lower corners and drag inwards to really resize them really small. Like I said, they're going to be way in the distance. Now, when I go to about that kind of size there, if I put my cursor outside of the transform handles, it gives me a two-headed arrow, and that means I can rotate it like so. So let's go for something like that, and then I'm going to drag these birds over to this kind of area over here. Now, the ones I'm really kind of interested in are these ones just here. I could just use a few of those. Now, the great thing is I don't need to use any kind of selection or cutout method to just get these birds off this original white background. Let's just press Enter to select to put that into place. All I need to do is just use a blend mode. And if I want Photoshop to say, look, get rid of the white areas, but keep the dark areas, which is the birds, I just come to the blend modes over here in the layers panel, and I choose multiply. And you'll notice that that white area virtually disappears. There's a little bit of visibility there, like a grayish kind of color, but on whole, it's pretty much gone. Then to get rid of most of the birds and just only have the ones that I want in there, I'm just going to do something really simple, like add a layer mask to this layer. Get a very, very simple, straightforward brush. I'll go for a fairly soft edged brush, paint with a black foreground color. We can see over in the toolbar. And then when I do that, painting on this layer, I can remove the birds that I don't want and leave the birds that I do want. So let's just remove a few of these here. Let's get rid of all that kind of junk at the bottom. I'm decreasing the size of my brush each time. I'm kind of like making it bigger or smaller using the left and right bracket keys. Let's just, I only want a few birds in the distance. And like I said, I like to do this because it just adds just a little bit of interest in the distance. So maybe something like that would be pretty cool. Now, because these birds are in the distance, there's a really bright light, they wouldn't be as kind of contrast as what they are. So all I need to do is just click on the thumbnail in the layers panel containing the birds, not the layer mask, the thumbnail containing the birds, and we can just lower the opacity a touch now to help them blend into that bright light coming over the horizon. So maybe something like that. And you can add as many birds as you want in the distance. You could kind of like duplicate this layer now containing the birds and then paint in white to reveal birds on that layer and then black to hide other ones. Very, very simple. Just a nice quick way of using blend modes to cut objects off their background. So I think we're pretty much done for now. There's going to be more we'll do on this background at some point, I'm sure. But now I think it's time to head over and start working on our athlete. Okay, so like I said, that was just a small segment of one of the full-length tutorials I've got available in my web store called Athlete. And in that tutorial, I'll take you through all kinds of things. There's about 15 or 16 videos, I think, that make up the tutorial. We start off with a pretty bad picture of a background and use loads of techniques in Photoshop, like cutting out and perspective changing, vanishing point, and all that kind of stuff to make the background how we want it. Then we work on the athlete, do a bit of body shaping, bringing out details, dodging and burning,
selections, and then bringing it all together to make one final picture. But hey, that's over on my web store, like I said, glyndewis.com/store. Now that's all I've got for this particular week, but at the end of this week I'm flying over to the Netherlands. I'm going to be out there teaching at the Professional Imaging Show. Going to be joined by people like Frank Doorhoff and Joe McNally, so if you're going to be there, definitely stop by and say hello. But between now and the next time we get together, definitely make sure, if you haven't already, that you click on the subscribe button. It's the only support that I ask of you guys that keeps this channel going. Just click on the subscribe button and let other people know about it. It's doing that actually gets me out of my sick bed, kind of. But hey, listen, that's all for this week. Have a great one, and I'll see you next time.